quarterbacks, cornerbacks, or maybe not cornerbacks. What am I talking about? Well, you'll find out in this 27th episode of the Golden Blue Breakdown Show with my co-host, Jonathan Martin. I am Couz, and we welcome you to this show. Whether you're listening on podcast, whether you're watching on YouTube, we appreciate you tuning into the show. If you are watching, please hit the like button. If you like what you hear, what we have to say here, and please subscribe to the YouTube channel. And then also, if you're listening, please don't forget to follow us on Couz's Corner, and also please leave us a 5-star review if you don't mind. All of that really helps out and helps us get our content out to more people. So, Jonathan, what's up, brother?
What's going on, Couz? Yeah, so with every week passing, we get a week closer to football. So
Yeah,
I know Mountaineer Nation and us included are really excited. So a lot to talk about when it comes to quarterbacks and maybe not corners this week. So it should be interesting.
yeah, I love how you realize what I was doing there, right?
Oh, yeah.
We reached out on Twitter and I left it on my YouTube comments post page as well, asking people for questions about what to cover tonight. We got one question. We're going to address that when we have the quarterback conversation. But before we jump in, I'm going to real quick give a shout out to the sponsor of this show, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner. We will be right back. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Thank you for sitting through the ads and letting us get the housework done, the housekeeping done there. Thank you to Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner for helping us keep the lights on. Please go support them if you need an attorney. Earlier today, when we knew we were going to be recording, Jonathan and I put a question out on Twitter or X, and I even posted it on my YouTube comments section. We only got one response for a question. We asked for questions. We only got one response back, and it was from Daniel Gigax. And Daniel says, with a loaded QB room, what's the chances Nico gets benched if things don't look great after the backyard brawl, or will there be some patience? If things just look okay, he thinks Nico will get the hook. So I'll go ahead and answer, and then I'll let you answer. My take to answer that question, and it kind of segues to one of our topics for tonight anyway, was the quarterbacks. We were going because we really haven't touched on that yet, right?
Right.
And everybody likes to talk quarterbacks. Is who will start at QB? Daniel seems to be assuming it's going to be Nico Marchiol based on his question. So my question to you is, or I'll answer it first. Is Nico going to start? My opinion, I'm not sure we'll know who the starter is. I actually have a feeling, and this is just a total guess and a gut feeling. I got a feeling that both quarterbacks are going to get some playing time in that first game of the season. Maybe even the first couple games of the season. And it may be the pit game before they actually pick a starter. And I think at the end of the day, I think Nico will end up winning the job. Now, some of that is me being biased because I kind of want Nico to win the job because of his loyalty. But I also think, based on some of the comments, even though he hasn't given us a lot, based on some of the comments Rich Rod has made about Nico, he seems to really like his game. Mm-hmm. And I think Nico's a good fit for his offense. But that being said, Jalen Henderson can run. I think he's probably faster than Nico. So what are your thoughts on who do you think will be the starter?
Yeah.
And do you think they will have a quick hook if things don't go well in the backyard brawl?
So my first thought is it really never is too early to have a quarterback controversy.
That's right.
It's not just something that we're seeing today. This is a topic, if you're a follow West Virginia football, you've seen for a little while now since Rich Rod took over. I think it is. I think you're right that I think a lot of people want that sentimental Nico to start because of him having multiple opportunities over the years to leave. He elected to stay. If you go back to the bowl game last season when Nico was even there and around the team, there wasn't very few players that Rich Rod reached out to, but Nico was one of them. And we joke a lot on this show about hard edge, but I really believe that Rich Rod believes that Nico is hard edge.
Mm-hmm.
He's tough, physical, he's disciplined. And quite literally, through his entire time in Morgantown, he has done everything that's been asked of him. And not only did he do it, he did it with a great attitude and as a great teammate. So I think it's understandable that a lot of people want maybe Nico. The argument here is it's versus what you have and what you are pretty sure you have versus is Jalen Henderson a more athletic version of Nico? That's the question. For me, it is all about potential. In terms of potential, it's true that Henderson probably has a little bit more, but it's just that it's unproven potential. Now he did start. I think it was in 23. He started the last 4 games and had a little success. Didn't even see the field last year. So I think his learning curve and his catch up is going to be a little bit more, even though it's a semi-level playing field. But I would 100% agree with you. Look, because I don't know this is going to be settled just before week 1. I think it could go on into the season. And, you know, if we know anything about Rich Rodriguez, sometimes it just takes a magical play, a magical game for a quarterback just to take hold of the team and take hold of the game and the season. And then he just rides that out. So who knows? There's going to be a lot of emotions around that Pitt game. And I think in a way he'll keep it kind of quiet to kind of downplay the position and to kind of keep Pitt. I will say that I think the other guys, Wilkins, Max Brown, Scotty Fox, I think there's a lot of excitement around them, but I don't think they're quite in that that topic of conversation for starter this year as opposed to Henderson and Markiel. So, you know, if I had to guess right now, I would probably say Nico. But again, because I think we got to remind ourselves, it's March, it's early March, and a lot can happen. But if I had to, if the season were to start tomorrow, and it's not, but if it were, I would say Nico probably is the odds-on favorite to get the job.
Yeah. And again, I'm not taking – that's not – for me personally, and I'm sure from Jonathan too, it's not a shot at Jalen Henderson at all. But it's hard as someone who does this and who analyzes and who's a fan too. Yeah. It's hard to it's a lot easier to pick Nico because I've seen him play. I've seen what he can do. Only thing I've seen with Jalen Henderson is I've seen some highlight tapes, highlight reels. You know what I mean? And they're good. Don't get me wrong. He's very athletic. He can move. He can throw on the run. He's got a strong arm. I like everything about him I've seen, but I just haven't seen enough of it because I haven't watched a ton of Texas A&M football, you know, and I didn't see him at Fresno State either. So before he came, so I just don't know a whole lot about him. So it's hard. So obviously it's going to be easier for me and you to pick Nico. At the end of the day, I just want the best guy to win the job, and I want West Virginia to win football games, whether it's either one of those guys or heck, if one of the other guys ends up somehow, you know, coming out of the ashes to win it. I don't care as long as they win games, you know.
Yeah.
As long as they're wearing that Mountaineer uniform, I'm going to cheer for them, right?
Yeah, I agree, and it is. I think we're on the same page here. That it's hard for me to. I don't know that get on board with Henderson is the right word because again, I repetitive here, but it's March. But it's hard for me to really get behind that idea right now because again, he never saw any action last season. Played the last 4 games of the season in 23. And so outside of that highlight tape, I think what's happened here is a lot of people are seeing that frame, right? That 6'3", that 230 pounds, that athleticism. And I think that it is they left-handed. I think that a lot of folks are getting caught up in it's the Nico plus a little bit more. And I'd be careful doing that because we do know a couple things about Nico. Number one, he's a gamer, and I talked about that. You go back to his game last year against Arizona, and his performance against Cincinnati wasn't as good. But he went on the road, and I think we would probably agree that was one of the best quarterback performances of the season last year against Arizona.
Yeah, it was.
So to your point, I mean, we remember him dropping that dime down the sideline, 35, 40 yards downfield. We remember those. We saw them. We witnessed them. We felt them. And with Jalen Henderson, we just don't have that other than a couple Twitter, YouTube videos in 2 and 3 minute clips. Not to say he won't do it. It's exciting to see what he can do. Heck, for all we know, that all can come to fruition, that he just gives you everything Nico does plus a little bit more. But I feel like I'm leaning towards, and I think maybe we are both on the same page there, that we almost kind of want to see it, right?
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I am excited about him, though. I will admit, I'm excited about Jalen Henderson. The highlights I did watch got me super excited about him. But there's in this day and age with the transfer portal and NIL, when a young man like Nico sticks around, he could have left last year when he didn't win the job.
Yeah, sure.
He definitely could have left when Neil got fired. And he didn't. He's stuck around. He wants to be a Mountaineer, and he obviously wants to be part of that hard-edged culture. So it's hard for me not to root for that. But again, at the end of the day, we're just Mountaineer fans who want to see Mountaineers win. So
and I want to be clear too. Just because I said Henderson didn't see action last season, look, I don't mean that as I'm not a believer or that necessarily I'm skeptical. It's just that, look, Texas A&M's loaded with talent, so that's not necessarily a knock on him. But it is true that it's easier to analyze and feel a certain way based off of something that you've actually seen. So,
and I think he might have battled some injuries too in his career too. That I'm not sure if that had anything to do with him not playing last year or not.
Yep.
But so that might come into the equation. But he's healthy. It's a fresh start for him. So I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to prove himself. And that's what I love about this. Is Coach Ross said it might be. Somebody asked him in the press conference. I got tickled about it. They asked him, when will we know who the starting quarterback is? And he said, when's our first game? And then they told him, he said, what time is it? And they said, 1 o'clock or 12 o'clock. He said, well, at 11:59, we'll know who the quarterback is. And he just
and I almost believe that, which is why I say I'm not sure he's going to let the cat out of the bag. And I don't even know going forward, to Pitt or anything like that as the season progresses, that unless somebody just takes that and just completely goes off to where it can't be ignored. I think he's going to play that very, very close to the vest going forward in the season.
I agree, and he's not going to give the media anything. I mean, he said the way he practices it, he gives all of his quarterbacks almost equal reps for the first few weeks.
Yeah. So, and if we've learned anything from Rich Rodriguez previously, and especially even though early on so far during camp, he's not given much. So if he's not giving it to us, he's not going to give it to anybody. So we're all probably just going to take a wait and see approach, and what happens, happens.
Yep. Agreed. Thank you, Daniel Gigax, for the question. We appreciate your support, brother. Next topic is Rich Rod had some very interesting comments to say when asked about Rodney Gallagher. I was waiting for someone to ask him this question. I've been waiting 2 weeks for somebody to ask him this question, and I'm glad somebody finally did. There's another question I want to be asked too that nobody's asked, but we might talk about that in a minute. But someone in the media asked him, Rodney Gallagher played some defensive back last year, played some corner. Is he going to do that? And I'm paraphrasing, but he essentially said, if Rodney has to play cornerback, then we didn't do a good enough job filling that room. And a lot of people took that as him taking a shot at last year's staff. I didn't really take it that way. I just think he took it as in the present moment and his thoughts on that. Did he go too far with those comments? Was that a shot at the previous staff, you think, or what are your thoughts?
So I'll first say that it's a good question. Whoever asked that, it's a good question. It's a legitimate question. And I will say that his response was a legitimate response. I don't think it was too far. I mean, listen, he's got the reins. He's got the keys to the car. Technically speaking, he can take shots if it was at anybody. I got to be honest, though. I don't know that he meant it disrespectful. But listen, Rich Rodriguez hasn't been shy about how he felt about last year's West Virginia football team. So if it was a little bit of a shot, he talked about didn't see him play much. He talked about turning it on a couple times and it just wasn't good enough. He talked about watching the bowl game until it made him throw up. And now with the Gallagher comments about if he's playing this, we didn't do a good enough job recruiting. So if it was a shot, if you will, it's technically not surprising to me because it's not really his first gotcha comment about last season. But listen, Rich Rodriguez is going to call balls and strikes. I mean, he just is. I think that's one thing people love about him is he's not going to sugarcoat it. Now, you may not like his response, but he's it's going to be black and white. You're going to know what he meant when he said it. So, but he's got a really good point, and the cornerback position was something that listen. We all had eyes last year. We saw that was a weakness, the defensive secondary. We know that. And if we knew that, Rodriguez knew that. And he made a point in the portal to talk about it and to get players and address the needs. And, I guess the last thing I would say, Couz, is, you know what? Kudos to him for putting it on his shoulders, right? I mean, he's not going to blame the kids. He's not going to blame Rodney. He's going to blame himself and his staff that, hey, and we talked about this last year, that when Jordan Leslie was there, he started to kind of throw some shade slowly at defensive players. And I'm not here to say that they don't get any of the accountability because they should. But we said several times last year that, hey, you guys recruited these players. So there needs to be a little hand up accountability there too. Mm-hmm. And so to me, I guess the final thought is I think it's kind of refreshing that Rodriguez put it on himself and his staff and said, hey, if I've got to convert him back over, that's on me. I didn't recruit the right guys. I'll take the blame for it. So I actually kind of find it a little refreshing.
Yeah. Yeah, I find his honesty, his transparency, his bluntness, whatever you want to call it. Because, and look, I think you said this on our last show or one of our last shows. I don't want this to be a Neil Brown bash fest. But I got so frustrated with him turning everything into a positive. Like everything was always sunshine and rainbows.
Right.
When it's almost like it made me at times feel like he was maybe questioning is not the right word, but questioning our intelligence.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like we can watch the game and tell everything's not that good. You know what I mean? And then, and at times it just got so, and I think the whole fan base got tired of that. I mean, West Virginia fans and every fan base, people who watch football a lot are usually pretty smart, a lot smarter than sometimes coaches give them credit for. Now we may not know the X's and O's but we can tell if a unit or a team is playing good or not, right? We're not that dumb. And at times I felt like he thought we were dumb. And I don't think that's what he was doing. I think that's just his personality. I think he likes to stay positive. I think he's just one of those guys that, tries to keep everything positive. That's, he didn't like negative questions in press conferences and things like that, but I love having a coach in Coach Rod that is honest. If the guys played like garbage, he'll tell you they played like garbage.
Yeah.
And the guys already know it. He's told them that already on the field. So it's not like he's telling us something that is a lie or that he's doing it behind their backs or, you know what I mean? So, and he does it without he does it without singling guys out necessarily. I mean, I don't think he does it in a disrespectful way. He's just like, look, they didn't play good enough. And they were soft. He used the word soft multiple times the other day in his press conference. And I love it, man. And I think some of that is just where he's old school. He's been around a while and he's at a point in his career where he probably, doesn't care. I don't want to say don't care, but, doesn't care what people think about him is I guess where I'm going, as much as what he cares about winning and he cares about doing his job well, but he's not going to care about what anybody thinks about him and how he answers questions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe he's motivating through the media too. Some coaches do like to do that.
Yeah. I've used the word refreshing a couple times in prior episodes about it. And to me it is, just because I like that, call it as it is. And he's not given a lot of information in these press conferences so far, but he has given little glimpse into that, like talking about players running out of bounds in practice to save tackles. He says, heck no.
We don't do that.
We don't do that here. We don't do that here. Early on, gosh darn it, he couldn't really name their names, but he talked about running backs. We got to play tougher. We got to be physical. We got to be more hard edge. Talked about how they got to be faster. They got to be more athletic. And it's early. But to me, I find that, because I agree with you. I lean more towards it was such a just the personality of the previous staff that it was all good, positive. And I think that carried over. I may maybe get a little carried away here, but I think that carried over into not that Rich Rod won't do it, but the team events, everybody coming to Neil's house, the cookouts. And it's not that teams don't do that. It's just it was one thing after another that was just positive versus somebody just looking at you and say, you screwed up. You need to play harder. You're not hard edge. You need to make a hit. We're not running out of bounds. That's soft. So I can appreciate it. And as we get later on into the summer and we get into camp next year, into camp, I'm excited to see once he actually learns their names, how more in depth on the coaching and the praise and the criticism, because he's fair. He's fair. So, like I said, refreshing is a word that I've used a lot, and it's good to see. But to the original question, I don't think it was too far. I think it's Rich Rodriguez honesty, and if we're being honest, he's 100% right. Listen, because we had this conversation last year. Neil Brown and his staff went out and got several guys in the portal to play cornerback and safeties and defense back, and we even thought, is Rodney that good of an athlete, or did we recruit wrong? Is he taken away from his offense? And if you'll notice later in the season, he progressed more as a receiver because he gave up the defensive side of the football. And I think Rich is smart enough to see that. So I don't think it's too far. I think it's just honesty.
I agree 100%, 100%. And I'm going to throw a curveball at you, because as you were talking.
Well, I've got a curveball for you. So what's the chances we have the same curveball? Go ahead.
Okay. I'm going to switch it up a little bit. We didn't go over. We kind of went over pre-show what we were going to talk about, but I thought of a new one. And
feel like I should be tapping drums here.
I feel like I might be copying Mountaineer Paul, because I think he did this on one of his shows. But I'm doing it too. But I'm not really copying him. If you were Coach Rod, or if you remember the media, rather, what questions would you ask? What 2 questions would you ask? Would you love to ask Coach Rod, or anybody on his staff for that matter?
Well,
if you had the opportunity, what's the first one?
Well, that's not where I was going. So I'll say, and we may want to touch on it. I was going to say, how did we not talk about Neil Brown to Texas? Potentially.
Let's do it.
We haven't talked about it. But first, the questions for Coach Rodriguez. First, is there any chance we could get Couz's Corner into the media availability? We need that.
I'm working on it.
No. I'll tell you that is a curveball. I think one would probably be generic. I think number one would be, it's early, but at this stage, how do you feel X amount of days in compared to previous stops, Jacksonville State, when you came in and did rebuilds? If you're how X amount of days in, how do you feel you are right now versus Jack State, versus Arizona, versus Michigan? In previous stops where you tried to rebuild programs, how does this compare, even though early, to some other stops? That'd probably be one.
That is a great question. And I hadn't even thought about that one.
Yeah, that's probably one. The second one, I don't know, Couz. I mean, if we just stuck with actual football, is he satisfied with? Even though early, has he identified any other areas where he feels like he needs to kind of look in the portal when it opens back up? I don't know that would be a question that you would get a lot of answer to, just because don't want to let that cat out of the bag. But that would be one. And, I guess the second one, and he might have been, or if it was non-on-field stuff. So if I had one serious one, and then the other one would probably be, I know it was a press conference. I know you came back. But when you actually walked back out on the field and had to whistle in your mouth, how'd it feel?
Yeah.
Just curious. So I'd probably
Mhm.
ask one football and one emotion question.
Yeah. I like it. I
But
like it.
that's a good segment, because the more I think about it outside of your 30-second curveball, I probably could think of some more. So it's a really good question.
Mhm.
Really good question.
Yep. What made me think about that was when I talked about the good, them asking a good question, and it was one I had wanted somebody to ask, and then the idea to do this just popped in my head, and then I remembered, wait a minute, I remember Paul doing this over in Locked On West Virginia a few shows ago, but so I know somebody probably said, go come on here and think I say I'm copying him, but we can all do this. We don't all content is not copywritten, right? I mean, we can talk about the same things.
Sure.
Anyway,
And I'll say, Rich, if you want to come on, I know a guy. I know a guy that can get you on here.
that's
So
right. Yeah, we can do it. We can do it right now.
I think I've got a connection or two that can book you on this show.
He has
So,
been he has been making the rounds on. He's been going on a lot of national shows. I've noticed.
yeah, yeah,
So
which is really good that
it is good.
that the attention's been paid back
Mhm.
to him returning.
I think it's great. I think it's great. That's what we need in this day and age of college football and college sports. The two questions I would ask, and maybe injury questions are off limits for some reason, because I've not heard one injury question asked so far this spring, which is extremely odd because it's usually the first question out of Greg Hunter's mouth. So I got a feeling somebody's told him we're not asking about injuries, but let's assume that's not the case. I would ask, where's Eddie Vestorinen in his recovery from his injury? Is he participating in spring practice? A, and B, we all know Jaheim White had a knee procedure done because he posted it on his social media pages. And Rich Rod made a comment that he's not practicing right now. Where's he at in his recovery?
Yeah.
That's the, those are kind of lumped into one question, but I would want to know, you got two guys who, Jaheim, I'm an obvious starter in my opinion, and then Eddie V, likely a starter because of his experience level. Where are those two guys at
Yeah.
in their recovery process?
So Eddie V is going to be. I think we would agree that he's going to be important to the season.
Mm-hmm.
He's tough, physical. Even though it's a different system, he's familiar with the field, the campus, the university. He's been around for a while. Jaheim's really, really an important one. So I don't know that he's necessarily given a whole lot of updates, but when he talks about players who are absent, and he talks about specifically the running backs, he has kind of thrown in the Jaheim's not here.
Mm-hmm.
He's talented, but I'm not really worried about Jaheim.
Yeah.
And so the question there, or the follow up would be, is he not worried about Jaheim because he's talented, he's smart, he's going to be able to pick up the system rather easy. They're working on some stuff behind the scenes, non-contact type stuff. Or is he not worried about him because he knows his progression is going well? Hopefully both.
Right.
But yeah, good question, because those are two players that if you're going to have some success next year, especially Jaheim, you're going to need them healthy.
Yeah. The other day, this is my second question, but I'm going to segue it. I would have tied it in to another question I heard. One of the reporters asked him about, I think they specifically asked about Rodney, and then I don't know if they asked him or he just decided to expand on how some of the other receivers are doing, but he didn't mention Dom Collins. And because Dom's an in-state kid, I thought maybe one of the reporters would say, hey, how about in-state receiver Dom Collins, who's, really fast. And of course, you and I are down here in Southern West Virginia, so we're biased, right?
Yep.
We want to see these Southern West Virginia kids do well. I would ask him, hey, where you see? Do you see Dom Collins? Where do you see Dom Collins fitting in this on this team or on this offense? Do you see him possibly, getting snaps? Do you think he needs another year development? Something like that. I would ask to see what he says, because I think somebody with his speed and his athleticism could blossom in a Rich Rodriguez offense.
Yeah, and I think you hit the nail on the head. We are supportive of all Mountaineers, but those Southern West Virginia guys just pull at you a little harder.
Yeah.
I will say some of the pictures that we saw a few weeks back. Dom's putting that work in the weight room.
Yeah, he is.
There was the picture, and I know you know what I'm talking about of the. Tell you how out of shape and old I am. I don't know if that's a vertical or a high jump or what they call that.
A vertical.
Okay, yeah. I mean, I knew what it was, but when you don't do that,
yeah,
in fear of tearing something,
right.
You stay away from it. But if you'll look, and you and I were, and if a picture could speak 1,000 words, you and I have been around Dom at various times. Not only was it impressive to see that vertical, but you could tell his legs, his thighs, his body. He really worked himself in the offseason, which to me shows the commitment and the investment into the program and himself and getting better. So, look, you can't teach speed.
Yeah, you can't. And Dom's always had a good work ethic. I mean, he used to go, it's my understanding, he used to go work out. He'd work out in the mornings. He'd go to school. They'd usually have their after school workouts. And then some evenings he would even go to he was going to a local trainer here that you probably know.
Yeah.
And working out there in the evenings too. He was working out sometimes 2 to 3 times a day, almost religiously.
Yeah.
And he's done that. He did that pretty much all through high school for the most part.
Yeah.
And, I think, and the speed is obviously a gift, but I think his work ethic has also helped, maybe maintain it and maybe even get him a little faster. Right. And of course it's helped him be stronger and all the other stuff too. But, and heck, I would even ask Jonathan, about Judah Price, Judah Price from Independence. He's a walk-on.
Yeah. The was it the 40s, or I saw something online with his sprint speed or something,
it was
miles per hour.
Yeah. It was, I'm trying to think of the word they used. Not
I don't think it was miles, but right at the top.
Yep.
Yes.
He was up there.
That's
I would ask
impressive.
about him for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, you can't teach that speed. So
acceleration, I think, is what they were measuring there.
There you go.
In miles per hour. Sorry, I was drawing a blank. But
well,
yeah, I mean, he's only 5'6" or 5'7", but he's a great athlete in his own right. What I fear about him is he's one of those walk-ons that Coach Rod's been talking about. They're going to have to get rid of some of those guys, to get their scholarship from 125 down to 105. I hope Judah's not one of them.
Yeah.
But we'll see. And, heck, I don't even know that scholarship players will be safe. Honestly.
Yeah, probably not. That's a lot of guys.
It is. And Rich, you can tell Rich really doesn't want to have to do that. I mean, he was a walk-on himself. So I think he has a soft spot for, and, Owen Schmidt was a walk. There's been a lot of great walk-ons through West Virginia history. And I think he has a soft spot for some of those guys, and he doesn't want to have to do that. But unfortunately, that's just a hand they've been dealt. And every program is going to have to do it. So it's not just West Virginia, but it is what it is. But anyway, I just thought that would be an interesting segment to do, something a little fun.
Sure. Good question.
As we were going through. But let's go ahead and talk about Neil to Texas then, since you brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, various reports about it. I think it's to be determined on exactly what the role will be. Now in this landscape, you can almost bring a million guys on and just give them an advisor role or an analyst role or whatever it may be. So curious to see what his position there is, what that entails. Obviously would be joining Chad Scott down in Austin. The biggest question is, if you're a money guy, is what does it save West Virginia? So what's the pay at it? The truth is he's still paid, and so I'd be curious to see what the position is and what they pay him. Texas has a lot of money, So that's an interesting thing. But, there was a lot of talk about Charlotte. That didn't work. Appalachian State, that didn't work. I think he was kind of semi-tied to a couple other programs. And then Texas out of nowhere. And you know what? It's kind of smart for Neil, not really jumping into a coach role. Not that he won't be doing some of that at Texas, but a leadership position, and it gives him an opportunity to. We believe Texas is going to be pretty good, and so it gives him an opportunity to get down there, get his keep his feet wet, and see what happens the following season.
Yeah.
So I don't believe he's going to be out long.
Yeah, I don't either. I think he might be doing. And again, I haven't talked to him, obviously, so I wouldn't know. This is a theory I have. I heard Dana Holgorsen. Dana Holgorsen took a year off after he got fired from Houston. He was still getting paid, so he wasn't worried about the money, right? And he just spent a year. He kept dropping into different camps and seeing different coaches, and he ended up as an analyst for TCU. And my understanding in his role, based on the interviews I heard him doing, was he would basically just show up on game day or maybe the day before or whatever to do help him with game prep or whatever, and with the game planning and then he'd leave.
Yeah.
No, he wasn't there I'm wrong. He wasn't there on game days. But he would pop in, help him with the game plan, and pop right back out, right?
Yeah.
And he was still getting paid $3 or $4 million a year from Houston, plus a couple $100,000 for doing that. It's a pretty good gig, isn't it?
It's a pretty good gig.
But he ended up saying he prefers to be in charge. He said so. He decided to get back into he's obviously now the offensive coordinator in Nebraska, but and he was an analyst for them for a little while before he took on the offensive coordinator role. But yeah, I could see Neil doing something like that, helping with game planning, just being an analyst or whatever.
Yeah.
And then spending a weekend at home with his family watching football.
Yeah. Look, it didn't work
going
out.
To his kids' games
yeah.
Sign me up.
It's pretty good. It's a pretty good gig. Yeah, look, it didn't work out with Neil in West Virginia, but I don't think anybody doubts he's a good person, good man, does it right. And he has won before. Still young. And there's a path for him in college football. And honestly, he needs to be in college football. So good for him to get down there, be a part of that program, whatever that role will be. And then in 2026, whatever happens, I'm sure he'll be more in a leadership role somewhere.
Yeah, I agree. Hey man, if I could get paid $4 million a year to sit home and do nothing,
sign me up.
Yeah, these guys are workaholics, man. I mean, heck, Jimbo's making what $9-10 million a year, and he still wants a job.
Yeah,
dude.
Yeah,
go work on your farm and enjoy life.
But my golf swing would be pretty good.
Yeah, I mean those guys, they're so competitive. Like they just can't. You know what I mean? It's just they need that in their life. And I mean there's nothing wrong with that, obviously. But I mean I'm a competitive guy too, but I'm not that competitive.
Not that competitive.
Oh, maybe that's why I'm doing this and they're doing what they're doing. Right
there you go.
Let's go ahead and jump in and talk some hoops, Jonathan.
Yep.
West Virginia with a big win over Utah. They scared us a little bit, though, didn't they?
Yeah. Well, yeah. If it wasn't interesting enough a couple weeks ago against Cincinnati, it got interesting last night. I don't know how many eyes were awake to see it because it was late.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, what a win. Listen, I know I'm not trying to call Utah going to Arizona, even going to Kansas. I'm not trying to say it's going to Houston and getting a win, but I don't think you can minimize it. Listen, you're a tired basketball team. You're a depleted basketball team. Injuries are catching up with you. You're down a couple, and it didn't look good early. Utah seemingly early on made every single shot they threw up, could not miss. They battled back to get it at halftime, and then early in that second half, here come Utah again, and they battled back again to close it out. So it was just a gutsy win. It was good to see this team. They were out there for several days out west. Fought hard against BYU first half and then in a raffle. But listen, BYU's a good basketball team. They're a good basketball team. So it was nice to get this. We've talked here for several weeks now about what West Virginia needed to do to get in the NCAA tournament. Couz, they're in.
I think so.
They are absolutely in. And now, to me, you are. I think they're in today. I don't think they're even a bubble team. Here's where it gets a little dicey. Happens every March. There's a few surprise teams that go on a run. Maybe they win their conference tournament, and so one of these smaller conferences now don't get just one; they get two. Maybe look at an NC State. Was it last year?
Yep.
That I don't even know if they were even on the bubble, and then they got hot. And it almost got to the point after 4 or 5 in a row, 6 in a row, you had to put them in. And so there's always going to be those teams. And so if you're West Virginia, you have to take care of business Saturday against UCF. Yeah. That's a must. What's that get us, Couz? 19
wins.
And we've talked about this. 19 made you sleep okay, made you sleep pretty good.
Yep.
20 you were like a baby. Yeah. There's also a lot to play for. If you look at the projections for the Big 12 tournament, depending on a couple outcomes, I want to grain of salt this, but I think I'm right. If West Virginia beats UCF and Kansas loses at Arizona, I think
which is very possible, by the way.
I believe that gets West Virginia to a bye and the 7 seed. And so you like that. You like that spot. It gives you a little extra rest. And 7's much better than if what looked to be a 9 or a 10 or even an 11 if you would have lost Utah. So, there was a couple must wins there at the end. Cincinnati was a must win. They got it. TCU was a must win. They got it.
Yep.
You could afford the Texas Tech and the BYUs.
Yep. Because they were ranked and they were already expected to beat you anyway.
Didn't hurt you. And then Utah was a must win, and they got it. So just an unbelievable job by this team. Here we are this late in the year, and they're still fighting. So I think as of today, they are 100% in, no question. You're just trying to prepare yourself for those 1, 2, 3+ teams that are going to shock you and get in, or you're kind of, are you playing for the 9 or are you playing for the 10 seed?
Yeah. Well said.
And there's a lot of people, Couz, there's a lot of people that would prefer that 10 over the 9. Because let's be realistic here. I don't think you want to. We had this debate today on social media on X. I don't know that I want to run into. You're probably not going to play Houston because they're not going to put you up, preferably against a Big 12 opponent. You want to play Duke. You want to play Auburn. Listen, we've even said this before. You're not going to luck your way through the tournament by dodging people. You have to play them. But there's a huge belief that you'd rather be in that 10 spot than 9.
Yeah. Yeah, and let me ask you something. I actually stayed up late enough to do a post game live show last night, and I was thinking about something. And I was live on show thinking about it out loud. Kind of asked the people in the chat, but I want to ask you this: do you think it will be to West Virginia's advantage because they're so thin roster wise, because Javon's played so many minutes? Do you think it would actually benefit them potentially to losing the first round of the Big 12 tournament so that they get a longer rest period before the NCAA started? Do you think they would be rusty? Would you be too afraid they'd get rusty doing that?
If I felt like, no, I think I'd rather the win. Yeah, and the reason why I would say that is I'd go back to the NC State argument there.
Yeah.
Is you just never know when you're going to catch that ball of fire and you're going to get that roll. And I believe momentum's a real thing. It doesn't disparage what you're saying, because on the surface, I agree with you. And we've talked about it. I just said it. This team's tired. They're thin. They're probably a little sore, beat, banged up, and we know
especially Eduardo Andre.
Eduardo Andre, and I believe Javon Small's still kind of fighting a little bit
KJ
with the
Tenner has been
yeah.
he's
I
been limping a
mean,
little bit. It looks like at
yeah,
times.
and I think these guys are having to play so many minutes, and DeVries has done a really good job trying to space that out the best he can. But no, I mean, I don't know that it would be the worst thing, but I guess if I had my preferences, I would rather just that role
Well,
take on.
I probably didn't ask the question. If you, and again, this is a total hypothetical. We can't read the future, but if you knew that they couldn't win the tournament, that they were only going to get to the second or third round anyway, wouldn't you rather them just lose in the first round and get that extra rest
You mean in this? What would
in
be
the
in the
Big 12
second?
tournament?
In what would be the second round?
Yes.
Yeah. If you feel like you're firmly in, if you've got 19 wins because you beat UCF,
Yeah.
um,
Or win a game. I don't know. It was just something I thought of. Normally, I would never say that because I mean, and obviously, I'm never going to cheer for them to lose a game.
yeah.
But not.
So my mind
There's a
rambled.
reason teams play for buys, right? They want
Sure,
buys for a reason.
sure.
That's where I'm going with it.
Yeah, and agree that I think that's important. I think my mind rambles a little bit with that. Is if you did lose, who's it against? Right? Is it somebody that you potentially that could take a spot?
Yeah, that's a
Is
good
it
point.
is it a
Yeah,
Cincinnati who's fighting for their life? Is it a TCU? Is it a Baylor?
yeah.
Um,
Great point.
so that I would be nervous that one team um, would be the one that could potentially get that role and catch fire and maybe take my spot. Completely valid, because the truth is this team needs a little bit of rest and as much health as they can, because if they that 8-9 matchup is tough if they're a 9. That 7-10 matchup is going to be tough. And then if you were to be fortunate enough to go by there, you're going to have a 1 or you're going to have a 2 waiting on you. So you're going to need probably as much rest as you can. But I'm just a huge proponent of just keep that momentum rolling, because I
Yeah,
think we've seen it in the past.
yeah. That's fair. I mean, they do get a few days rest between anyway, but it's not a full week. I think it's only if you make it to the conference title game. I think you only get 4 days off maybe before the tournament starts, something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah. I'm trying to look. Sorry for me doing this. If
It's all
if
right.
they can win Saturday, it believes the projection is there wouldn't be a game until Wednesday. And that appears to be a late night game, the 7 p.m. slot.
That's a little better.
So that would give you, I mean, that would be much better than having to play Tuesday. I mean,
Oh
you'd
yeah,
literally
for
have,
sure.
and one of those days are travel days. So if you could play Wednesday night, that's going to give you Sunday. It's going to give you Monday. You're going to have a travel day. So technically, you're going to get a couple days, 3 days off. Um, so yeah, it's a good question, and really one that I think you could almost make an argument both ways.
And it won't be this year because it's too close. But one of these days, Jonathan, I'm going to
Yeah,
take my bald rear end to Kansas City and watch the Big 12 tournament.
man, I know.
I've
I've
heard so many awesome things about it. I've heard it's a great time. Man, it's so daggone far for us, man.
It is. I would love to go. I'll say that I have been, which is ironic because West Virginia doesn't play in these conferences. I've been to an ACC tournament because where we're at, they're in Charlotte.
Yeah, it's 3 hours away.
It's an easy drive. It's a good drive. The weather's usually nice. It's all downtown. I've been there. I've actually been to an SEC tournament, and I'll say a conference basketball tournament is unlike anything else. And the Big 12 does it right. They
Yeah,
do it right.
yeah,
And I'd absolutely love to go. And what would be even better than going and watching your team and watching them make a run?
that'd be awesome.
That
Yeah,
would be fun. But
yeah. But they say it's a really good time that
yep.
the Big 12 does things right, like you said, and they have a lot of stuff going on outside of just the basketball. So they have food, special food, and they have entertainment. with DJs and singers and all kinds of stuff. So,
Yep.
It'd be a good time, man. But in Kansas City, I think it's about a 9-hour drive from here,
Yeah,
something like that.
it's a pretty good trip. And hey, I love barbecue.
Yeah.
So I think I'd love to make the
Me
trip.
too. Me too. I also plan at some point, hopefully, to get to Dallas or Frisco or whenever, to either the Big 12 Combine or Media Days or something one of these days. That's a even longer drive. I'd probably fly that one. But I looked at the route and we're totally off topic here, but the route to get to Dallas from here takes you through Nashville, Tennessee, and Memphis, Tennessee. There'd be nice little stopovers on the way.
They would be nice. I'd like to go. I'd like to go, and you know what? The future seemingly is pretty bright for this West Virginia team.
Mm-hmm.
So might just happen to be something we put on the calendar.
But one of these days, you and I take a guys trip, man, and we do that.
I'd love it. I'd love it. I think the question is too. And I'll say this real quick: is how far do you think West Virginia can make the run in the Big 12 tournament? A lot of it is matchup dependent.
It is. I'd have to see that's why I was like, I'd have to see the brackets first to see how they match up.
But hypothetically, if you were that 7 matchup, you're going to get a Kansas State and Arizona State with the potential to play maybe a Texas Tech. So winnable, and then after that,
to the semifinals probably.
And after that, the odds are pretty good that you would get an Iowa State.
So you've already beaten once.
You have. So
I mean, it's. I mean, we've seen Bob Huggins' teams make it. We've seen they played in the Big 12 title game twice or 3 times.
Yeah,
never were able to win it. But I mean, this team, the way they're built, the way the culture is, they're mature. They don't get rattled. They're not afraid of the moment. We've seen when they need to win games, they step up and do it for the most part. It's not always pretty, and they might make you nervous at the end, but they find a way to get it done, right?
They do.
And I wouldn't put it past them to make a run. I think they have the ability to do it. And I think Coach DeVries is good enough to coach them to do it. By the way, what about that stat that if he wins 2 more games, if he wins against UCF on Saturday and he won 1 game in the Big 12 tournament, he will have 20 wins in every season of his career.
I think I think we're witnessing this season. We're witnessing that stat in real time on how good of a coach he really is.
Yeah.
Couz 20 wins. That's
with it.
And I don't know about the prior seasons. You know, when you get to Drake, I certainly don't know about early on, but he built that culture. He built that team. So it's surprising in a way that he was able to carry it that long, but it's not surprising in the sense of once you get that ball rolling, it almost gets on autopilot, right? Mm-hmm. The job he would have done this year with this team after what it was, and you want to talk about a roller coaster of a season. From the very beginning, it was a complete rebuild. Then you're like, you know what? We've got some depth. We've got some players. Then you lost some guys. And then it was just up and down. And to still even to be at 18 wins, potentially 19 plus. What an unbelievable coaching job. And honestly, it's just kind of fun that we're able to witness it. His level of intensity and passion for the game, it's in a way not surprising because he is 100% somebody you would want to play for and give maximum effort.
Yeah. And if Ren Baker, if you're listening, and maybe he is, I don't know. He's been on the show before, so maybe he is listening. If you are, lock him up. Please. Mountaineer Nation is begging you to lock him up. Keep Iowa or anybody else that may come calling away because we want to keep Darren DeVries in Morgantown for as long as possible.
A long time.
For as long as until he has a losing season, then we want to run him. And I'm kidding. That's what we do, right?
but we're going to really get going. But when you talk about where West Virginia is today with coaches, The job
Oh,
DeVries has
gosh.
done, the job Coach Kellogg has done with the women's team.
Look what Saban's is doing with baseball.
Saban's is doing. Rich Rod is back. Yeah.
The men's soccer team still competing at a high level. The women's soccer team still doing well with Nikki Izzo Brown.
Could even throw golf in the mix.
Golf is doing well. The Celia McCabe is an Olympian on the women's track side. Rifles still competing for national championships.
But just a special time right now with special coaches, and it's not something that we get going in the moment, and I think we realize it, but we don't really think about it.
The wrestling team, by the way, got ranked for the first time in years last year.
Yeah, so just a nice time to have some quality coaches in Morgantown for sure.
And Renbaker he didn't hire all those coaches, but he hired several of them.
Yep.
So got to give hats off to Ren for the job he's done so far as AD, in my opinion, and for those coaches who have done such a good job in proving Ren right so far in his hires.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, I told you before the show, Jonathan, that I don't know that we'd make it an hour. By gosh, we're about going to get there. I think you and I could talk about the grass growing for an hour.
Yep, and I think it's what I just said. We just get going, and who knows? So it's, but hey, it's a fun time. Football's exciting. Men's and women's basketball is just now ramping up into the postseason. There's a lot of excitement, so there's a lot to talk about.
Mm-hmm. Want to remind all of you watching, you see it on the screen, but for those listening on podcast only, be sure to check Jonathan out on X. It's at Jonathan K. Martin. It's Jonathan with no H at the front. Check me out at Couz206. We have for this show, there's a page called at GB Breakdown _. You can check us out there. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel, Couz's Corner. Please subscribe to Hoops from the Hills, where we cover West Virginia basketball. Please follow us on the Couz's Corner podcast. Please leave 5-star reviews. All of that stuff helps us, and all of that is free. None of the stuff I just mentioned cost you a penny. So please do that. I would really appreciate it. Jonathan, anything else you want to add before we say goodbye to these fine folks?
Nope, just good time in Mountaineer Nation, and ready for next week. We'll have a lot to talk about.
We should. I'm definitely looking forward to it. We have might be a hoops heavy show next week, but nonetheless, we'll have a ton of content.
Okay, absolutely.
Yep. Well, we appreciate everybody for tuning in. Have a great day in Q Country Roads.